Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, on Friday the 15th, our NOAA high-resolution satellites, our low Earth orbiting satellites, got a great view of the big low-pressure system that was moving through the Great Lakes Basin. As it came out of the Midwest, we saw some really good snow in parts of Minnesota and Iowa, and on the backside of this low here, and some snow over the weekend in the interior parts of the Northeast. Here's the main upper-level front, and tucked in between all of that, there were several rounds of little convective bursts, little snow squalls that were tucked into this part of the Midwest. But what I want to draw your attention to is actually over here coming out of Colorado. If we zoom in on that, you can see this large dust storm right here in this part of Colorado. A view from our geostationary satellites showed that that dust moved through parts of southwestern Kansas, got into parts of the panhandles of Oklahoma and Texas, and eventually made its way all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Now, this is a sizable dust storm here, and I want to thank Nora Ferris for giving us this incredible view of it in Kansas. So as she was driving through here, you can see just how thick and how optically opaque this particular dust storm was. What an incredible view, and thank you, Nora, for sharing this with us. Well, when I think about this, it brings me back to our discussion on drought. And this is the latest drought monitor, again, released last Thursday, showing us the extent of drought across the western part of the United States. What I'd like to do for you, though, is, yes, we do have in parts of Colorado into, this part of the southern plains, getting back to New Mexico, extensive drought. But we have seen over the last 2 months, really the beginning of our cold season here, improvement in Texas, improvement in the southern plains, whereas we've seen degradation here in parts of the northern plains getting toward the Great Lake Basin, and then as you see in California. So the questions that we're going to propose to answer here is the pattern going to change enough to change these two maps over the coming month? And what we have to change is this. I'm going to take you about a mile above our heads where the pressure is about 850 millibars. We're going to look over the time period of December through mid-January. What you're seeing here is the flow of the atmosphere. Now, these winds coming anomalously out of the east, and I'll show you those anomalies in a moment, that is our La Niña. And one of the things that I think the La Niña has influenced is the flow in the low levels here in the North Pacific, which has largely just made this hard turn toward British Columbia. The low-level flow then comes over the Rocky Mountains, and then I want to say dives, but it doesn't truly dive through the Midwest, and it gets picked right back up and sent back into the North Atlantic. Now, the reason why I don't want to say that it's diving there is because when you look at the anomalies, what we see is the flow comes in like this, and then it's relatively weak across much of North America, meaning that we're getting this more mild Pacific flow without the deep anchored cold air over the Hudson Bay extending into the eastern half of the United States. You can then see the influence of the La Niña, very strong trade winds here screaming across the Pacific, and that's something we're going to address here again in a few moments. In fact, let me just show you the animation from midsummer here of our La Niña all the way to the beginning of 2021. You're going to notice that it begins to fade. Okay, so we're starting to see some warmer water showing up here off the west coast of South America. Still a big nose here in what we call Niña region 3.4 of these stronger trade winds and the cooler water. But look at the cool water the warm water, not cool, the warm water that's extending right here, basically north of Hawaii toward British Columbia. Thinking about that, I want to show you a time series in the North Pacific. So this is really inside of this bounding box right here of upper ocean heat content. So we think about this as being the top 300 feet of the ocean. Since the 1970s, there's been and this is measured here by buoys, we've seen a pretty remarkable increase in ocean temperatures there. And even big La Niña events like the one we had in 2010 to 2011 or, 98, 99, right in through here, we weren't able to really bring in a lot of cold water to this area. Now, what does that mean? This year, it means that this has helped aid quite a bit of more mild Pacific air making its way across North America during this winter. And as a result, the La Niña has not been able to really bring its cold water clear up into the Gulf of Alaska. Now, I do want everybody that's watching this to be paying attention to see if, for some reason, cold water emerges throughout this spring in that area, because that'll have a major implication on our summer temperature and precipitation patterns. But this through January 16th is what the pattern looks like. And so we can see the results of this. Now, this is zoomed in right on top of the North Pole. But if you look across much of North America, it's been mild, especially through Canada. Very mild through Canada for this winter. The coldest air has been here. It's been over parts of Russia, getting into China, and it's been on this side of the planet. Now, thinking about that, I want to take you back to a time period where we had the opposite of this. You see, if you go back and look at that low-level flow for the winter that began in 2013 and extended into early January 14, the difference is here. You see the flow come in and it peaked into a ridge here, but had a much easier time diving over the mountains and then really screaming across the North Atlantic. And we saw during that winter of 2013 to 2014 much colder air east of the Rocky Mountains, as you see here, with more mild air to the west. Helping this along was the major displacement of the polar stratospheric vortex during that winter. So now let's look at the beginning of 2014. We had a ridge that built in here into the North Pacific, another one that built into the North Atlantic. Now again, this is in the stratosphere. And what it did was it really split our vortex up into two pieces. One was anchored over parts of Russia. The other was right here between, northern Canada, Hudson Bay to the Great Lakes. And what that ended up doing was giving us all that cold air. Now look at what we've got this year. As I play this forward, we have a big ridge, a big displacement of the polar vortex that's sitting over parts of Greenland and the Arctic. But it split the vortex up into a piece that went into Europe and another one, just watch this again with me, that stayed here over Russia. So this has not let the brutally cold air into North America and maybe won't do so until we finish the month of January and get toward February. We're going to talk about that, though, in a moment here. So what do we have to deal with in the near term? Our troughs are not truly anchored to cold air, and they're behaving in a very interesting way. So let me show what I mean here. As I play this forward, we're going to pause it right away because I want you to see what happens over the next 48 hours or so. As I move this very slowly forward here, we have a ridge that sends its flow breaking here through the Canadian prairie and allows the flow to connect with this trough that's exiting the northeast. So this is the low that brought in that big cyclone on the 15th and 16th through the Great Lakes Basin. But what it's effectively done is it's allowed a cutoff low to develop over California. But the problem is that cutoff low, just watch it there, slides off the coast and then heads toward the Baja by the time we get toward the middle of the week. Now, what you don't like about this is this brings flow out of the east, not returning moisture to California. This is going to send the flow much farther to the south, and therefore this isn't a precipitation maker for California. While that's occurring, a ridge is developing here between the Yucatan and the Greater Antilles, and we do have little clipper systems that come out of Alberta and cut toward the Great Lakes. For example, watch here on Wednesday, moving through Thursday. You can see the clipper cutting through. Now, our cutoff low rejoins the flow by the time we get toward the end of the week, as you see here. And there's another trough that dives down right here into California for our weekend. But these troughs, and I say this all the time, but I'll say it again, they're not anchored to deep cold air that extends into the Arctic. They're just not. And therefore, bringing in brutally cold air doesn't seem to be the way things are going to take shape here. There's too much ridging happening here and here to allow for a deep trough of colder air to really become established over the Canadian archipelago and connect with the lower 48. So what I'll be watching here is that things are going to get active. I'll just kind of rock you back and forth here for the start of next week. We see troughs cutting into the Pacific Northwest. Yep, good for precipitation here. And this trough will be one I will be watching carefully because it's going to come toward me right here in my home state of Illinois. And that one by next Tuesday, if the models got it right, could kick off a serious cyclone here. But I'll show you the likelihood of that happening. But even as I play this on out, we just see the troughs disconnected from deep cold air. And I'll show you that more in a few moments. So our high-resolution NAM model, playing through the day here on Monday, now getting into Tuesday morning, afternoon and evening, and then early Wednesday morning, shows you each of those pieces coming together. So what I'll show you is, let's go back to Monday morning, some light snow in the northern plains, some lake effect here behind the big system that exited the northeast. There's a weak little shortwave that's cutting right down here through this evening, coming through parts of Missouri and eventually cutting right along I-70 here through parts of Illinois. Some light snow behind it, as you see, But that little shortwave is going to cut through the Ohio River Valley in the overnight hours, bringing some light snow in through this area, so keep an eye out on it. By Tuesday morning, I love seeing some snow in this part of New Mexico and Colorado. We need the snow in this area to help with the drought. But with the development of a ridge that's sitting right down here, we're going to watch toward the middle end of this week quite a bit of heavy precipitation from Texas through this part of the southeast. But as I let you go to the end of this animation, while we still see some lake effect snow here, cold enough air on the backside to bring that through, there's a clipper we talked about on Wednesday, but here's our cutoff low. And you notice that as I take you out to 6 a.m. Wednesday, it's pretty far to the south, not bringing precipitation into California. Now to see from this point beyond, I got to take you over to the European model. Let's get it going and pause it right there. This would be Wednesday morning. Now you see that cutoff low. You see the clipper. Here's the lake effect snow. Very strong winds in the northern plains. As we play this forward, going from Wednesday afternoon and evening, getting into Thursday morning, there we go. The clipper slides over into Ontario, and we start to see the flow around that high-pressure cell, bringing in that moisture we talked about right here from Texas through parts of the southeast and into parts of the mid-south. But our upper-level low, that was south of California, still moving through here, bringing precip into Mexico and eventually into Arizona and New Mexico. But here we are by the time we get to Friday. Our clipper stayed here in Canada. It's now moving over toward Quebec. And what we're going to watch over the weekend is heavy rains. Well, not the weekend, but the end of the week, Friday. We're going to watch heavy rains down here in parts of the southeast, from the lower Mississippi River Valley over to South Carolina. Now, high pressure slides in. Do you see it right there? Slides into Iowa. And this could be the setup as deeper troughs anchor into the west for a pretty active go of it early next week. We see snow on Saturday in the mountains. Great to see that. But you also notice this low that's beginning to emerge here in Colorado. Now, I'm going to watch that one carefully because by Sunday into Monday, the models are suggesting that shortwave breaks out ahead of this and develops a pretty deep cyclone. There it is, Monday into Tuesday. Now, this is one to watch carefully because it could bring in some storms and some heavy rain to the south, snow on the backside of it, very windy conditions. Meanwhile, as this cuts through, the deeper trough now starts to increase our chances for precipitation for the west as we finish the month. But to show you the likelihood of this, the European ensemble, while it does have a small clustering of lows in this area, there's not much yet to hang your hat on to tell you that this is a really robust forecast for next Monday night into Tuesday morning. In other words, we'll watch it all week long. But as we just look at the next week, clipper system in through here, I'll show you the snow in a few moments. Got the snow on the northern side of that next system. We'll see how much is coming through there. Around that high pressure cell over the Gulf of Mexico, look at the rain we're expecting in through here. So there's going to be a corridor right in through here of, ½ inch to upwards of 2 inches of precipitation this week. And there's our upper level low coming out of, really the Baja, slowly moving over toward Colorado, where we could get some good snow. Take a look at it. How much snow we could get here in the mountains, this is excellent to see. But there's the clipper, there's the snow here in parts of the northern plains, and we got a chance in through here, 50 to 80% chance of picking up 3 inches in that area. Lake effect snow is going this week though, as you can see. So with our near-term stuff kind of out of the way here, look at where the pattern's going to be by day 10. We still see this ridge, the ridge that's been between Greenland and the Hudson Bay. And we're watching this ridge over here retreat farther to the west, allowing for better flow going into week 2 to come across the west coast. But there is no deep cold air across this part of North America. And even as we got to day 15, it's still the same thing, okay? There is no deep troughs in this area forecast by the European ensemble or the GFS ensemble as well. So what we get is a continuation of what I would call more milder air, but much more active for the west coast. Love to see the above average precipitation there as the pattern changes. We could see in through this area an active storm track as well, which we've been talking about for a while as we finish January. Let's talk temperatures. I made this map on Sunday. It just shows you, and I thought you just might like to see it, the coldest temperature we've had so far this winter. So you can just pause it and take a close look at your area, and you can see how cold it has been, the coldest we've recorded. But the question is, are we going to get much cold air in the near term? So here's Monday's high temperatures in numbers, and the anomalies are in the color shading. As we go into Tuesday and then into Wednesday, look at the warmth in the Central Plains on Wednesday. Much above average temperatures here, 20 plus degrees above average. It begins to change as we get toward Thursday, which is still another mild day. But watch as we go toward the weekend. Here's Friday and into Saturday and Sunday. Now, this is where the pattern begins to shift and change, and much cooler air comes into the western part of the United States. And you can see through day 5 through 10, that's where the extent of the colder air is in both models. What we've seen, though, in the model trend is more of a retreat back toward the Canadian Prairie in the northwest of where the coldest air will be. More mild conditions have favored the east, and they've also favored the southern part of the United States. I see that too when I look out here into the day 10 through 15 forecast. And while the models do have a bit of a discrepancy over the position of a trough over the southeast, with the European being cooler, they do keep that coldest air really at bay over the west and over the Pacific Northwest, the western part of Canada and Alaska. And that's been an interesting trend in the models to be watching. They're just not letting the super cold air become well established across the eastern part of the United States. There is some tropical support for this. As the MJO moves here toward phase 7, we know that in February, phase 7 tends to keep the coldest air here, but not, there aren't a lot of days historically where that brings in lots and lots of cold air across much of the rest of the United States and Canada. So this is what the tropics are saying. What about this La Niña? Well, remember what we talked about at the beginning. Strong trade wind push here, more mild ocean temperatures in this area. Well, if the flow continues to come out of that area, we're going to not be able to bring in the brutally cold air. So where I finish is our 45-day forecast from the European. What it suggests is our coldest conditions stay inside or to the west of that line I drew. And while cold air will be let out at times, bringing in sustained cold air east of the Rocky Mountains in the United States for 10 plus days seems limited. We need to get the La Niña, the North Pacific, the North Atlantic, and the polar vortex to all work together to change this pattern. And this is what they're advertising right now, which is not a change. But it does suggest an active Ohio River Valley storm track, Canadian clippers, and also northwest seeing quite a bit of wet conditions. So this will be the pattern we're going to benchmark against as we go forward. But with that, I'll go and wrap it up here. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Thanks.